When Keanu Reeves steps onto the late-night stage, just days after the death of Pope Francis, the audience expects a quiet evening, perhaps a gentle chat, a reflective story or two, maybe a brief mention of his next film, but something's not right. From the beginning, the mood feels different. The host tries to kick things off with humor, leaning into laughs, but Keanu isn't playing along. He's calm, yes, but distant, somewhere else. Then his eyes settle on something unusual. A small golden rosary, laid quietly on the table before him. It hasn't been mentioned. It just sits there waiting. That's when the air begins to shift. The questions start to change. So do the answers. What starts off as a typical interview slowly transforms into something entirely unexpected. A moment of live reckoning. A hidden truth begins to surface. One that's been locked away in silence for years. By the time Keanu finishes speaking, the audience isn't applauding. They're holding their breath. Keanu Reeves, in front of a live studio crowd, breaks years of silence about a secret encounter in the Vatican. And what he reveals may challenge everything we think we understand about faith, power, and prophecy. Oh, and before we continue, tell us in the comments, what's the one thing you admire most about Keanu Reeves? The studio lights flicker for a moment, then settle. The soft hum of the cameras glows across the faces of the audience. There's a buzz of excitement, but underneath it, something else, an edge of curiosity, maybe even tension. Tonight should be routine, a talk show, jokes about celebrities, funny anecdotes from movie sets, but the world is still reeling from the death of Pope Francis. And Keanu's presence, tonight of all nights, feels like more than coincidence. The host, all smiles and late-night charm, steps into his role smoothly. Ladies and gentlemen, Keanu Reeves. Thunderous applause erupts. A few audience members rise. Others lift their phones, discreetly recording even though it's technically not allowed. Keanu walks on slowly. No flashy entrance. Black suit, no tie. His hair a little longer than usual. He smiles politely but doesn't seem fully present. They shake hands, they sit. On the table, water, cue cards. And between them, curiously, a small golden rosary on a velvet cushion. So, Keanu, the host begins, trying to keep things light. What a week, huh? The Pope passes and you still don't age. What's your secret, holy water? A ripple of laughter. But Keanu only gives a faint smile. He says nothing. His gaze falls to the rosary. Not a glance, he sees it. And he stops. The silence grows heavier by the second. The host shifts in his chair. Everything okay? He asks with a nervous chuckle. You're more zen than usual tonight. Keanu doesn't answer right away. He reaches out gently, brushing the rosary with his fingers, his eyes unfocused, drifting inward. He told me something in Rome, Keanu says softly, barely above a whisper. Something I've never said out loud. The host straightens. The audience is completely silent. The air has changed. Maybe today, Keanu adds, maybe I'm supposed to tell it. It's unclear now whether this is scripted or not. Is it a story, a bit, a clever plug for a new film? But Keanu isn't acting. His face is still. Tell what? The host finally asks. What Pope Francis entrusted to me, Keanu replies. Something he didn't want to take to his grave. You can almost hear the control room scrambling, but no one interrupts. I wasn't there for a film, Keanu begins. It was something else entirely. He pauses. I was in Florence, filming a small project, quiet, independent. One night, a knock on my hotel door. No name, just a man with an envelope. Vatican seal. Every breath in the room holds still. Inside a letter, Keanu continues. Not official, personal, handwritten from Pope Francis himself. What did it say? The host asks, now quieter than before. Keanu gazes ahead. It said, I would like to walk with you in silence among the olive trees. That was it, no press, no fanfare, just that. And you went? The host asks. Keanu nods. Of course. I didn't know why. Thought maybe it was for a donation or advice. But it was much more. He shifts in his seat, the rosary still resting between them. They brought me in through a side gate, no guards. Just a Monsignor who led me through stone corridors. And there he was, in a garden under an old olive tree. Keanu pauses again. He looked frail, so thin, but his eyes, they were alive. He began speaking immediately. He said he'd seen a video of me visiting a children's hospital. That I didn't speak. I didn't want recognition. He said that silence spoke louder than any sermon. Keanu inhales. Then he told me he hadn't heard God's voice in years. The room stiffens. You could feel the chill move across the audience. He said the weight of his role made him feel isolated, that he prayed but heaven stayed silent, and then he said something that's never left me. Keanu looks into the crowd now. Faith can survive silence, he told me, but I fear that one day it will begin to imitate it. The host whispers, "And what did you say?" I said nothing. I just listened. Keanu reaches into his jacket, reenacting the memory. Then he handed me another envelope, sealed in red wax. He said, "If I don't see you again, this secret must live." A long pause. "Did you open it?" The host asks, the tension peaking. Keanu shakes his head. "No, not yet. But now that he's gone, I don't know if I can stay silent anymore. Not a breath in the room, not a cough, not a whisper." Keanu leans forward, eyes back on the rosary. "It's been with me ever since," he says. "Every set, every hotel, every night I wondered, why me? And suddenly this isn't a talk show. It's a reckoning. A man on live television, holding the weight of a dying pope's last words and deciding, in real time, whether to set them free. I had never opened it. I convinced myself it wasn't my place." He glanced upward, eyes distant, as if searching for something beyond the studio lights. "But when I learned of his death, something shifted inside me, something irreversible." He reached into his jacket with deliberate care, fingers moving as if handling a relic. Keanu drew out an envelope, its edges yellowed by time, the crimson wax seal unbroken, embossed with the papal crest. A murmur rippled through the audience, a subtle wave of unease as if the air itself had thickened. The host's voice tightened. "You're going to open it now?" Keanu didn't answer. Instead, he held the envelope aloft, letting the cameras linger on its aged surface. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he broke the seal. The soft crack echoed like a gunshot in the hushed studio. He unfolded the letter, his hand steady despite the weight of the moment. He began to read, his voice low but clear. "To the man of silence, who listens more than he speaks and sees more than he reveals." The host turned toward him, the audience leaning forward as if pulled by an invisible force. "This world does not need more saints adorned in gold," Keanu continued. "It needs men who will carry light through the shadows cast by those meant to protect it." The paper quivered faintly in his hands, not from fear, but from reverence. "I write this with a heart torn between duty and despair." He read on. "For years I fought behind marble walls. I wore the crown of a fisherman while drowning in a sea of secrets." Keanu paused, swallowing hard. "There are forces within this church I could never purge. They wear crosses on their chests but move like wolves. I tried to expose them. I failed." The host opened his mouth to speak but stopped, as if the words had caught in his throat. Keanu pressed on. "And now, if my voice is silenced, I ask you, an outsider untouched by the politics of my world, to carry this truth, not to destroy but to preserve." He paused, then added, "And at the end of the letter there was something else." He unfolded a second sheet, his eyes narrowing as his voice dropped to a near whisper. It was a vision, a prophecy. The audience stirred, a low hum of anticipation. The host leaned closer. "The Pope wrote." Keanu took a breath, then read, "The one who will undo me shall not come from within. He will smile, he will dress as a friend, but he will carry the void." Gasps punctuated the silence. The host blinked, visibly shaken. He believed, Keanu said slowly, that the collapse of faith wouldn't come from heresy, but from imitation, from someone who seemed pure but brought nothingness. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, as if the room itself held its breath. "I didn't understand it then," Keanu added, his voice softer now. "But after that letter, everything changed." The host found his voice. "What do you mean?" Keanu met his gaze. "I started studying quietly. Faith, power, silence." I spoke to no one. I wanted to understand what he meant. A pause. And that's when they started coming. The host's brow furrowed. "Who?" Keanu turned to the camera, his stare piercing. "Letters, anonymous, warning me, all connected to him, all telling me never to reveal what I knew." He held up the second sheet, its weight far heavier than its frail paper. His eyes scanned the studio, then settled on the audience. "This part I've never read aloud before. Not to anyone." Even the crew behind the cameras froze, caught in the same spell that gripped the room. He read again. The one who will undo me shall not come from within. He will smile. He will dress as a friend, but he will carry the void. A murmur swept through the studio like a gust through brittle leaves. The host sat motionless, as if a single movement might shatter the moment. Keanu folded the letter with care and set it beside the rosary on the table. He believed someone outside the church would rise not as an enemy, but as a mirror, empty. Someone who would gain power through charm, through mimicking goodness, and then hollow everything out from within. The host finally broke the silence, his voice unsteady. He thought this was already happening? Keanu nodded. He told me, the world's faith is no longer crumbling from truth. It's starving from illusion. The host shifted uncomfortably, glancing sidelong, perhaps hoping for a producer's signal to cut to commercial. None came, no one dared interrupt. Keanu continued, his voice steady. He also said the next great step of the church might not come from the church itself. The words hung in the air, unsettling, prophetic. The host tried again. You mean someone else would carry its mission? Keanu didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted to the rosary. He believed faith had to evolve, but he was terrified it would be manipulated before it could. The audience was silent, no coughs, no rustling. It wasn't mere curiosity now. It was a shared gravity, a sense that something sacred and dangerous was being unveiled. The host tried to lighten the mood. These are big ideas, Keanu. Theology, power, prophecy. Maybe we should take a breath. But Keanu's voice cut through, not loud but resolute. No, this isn't a story. It's a warning. And there's more. The host leaned back, uncertain. Keanu went on, his tone unwavering. After that meeting in the Vatican, I went home. I didn't speak of it, not even to my closest friends. But a year later, I received a letter. No return address, no signature. He reached into a folder beside him and unfolded a piece of paper. Less aged than the Pope's, but heavy with intent. He read, "Do not open the envelope. There are forces watching." He was surrounded. You are not. Stay in the shadows. Silence protects more than you imagine. The host's eyes widened. That's threatening. Keanu nodded. It was the first. I received 6 more over the next 4 years. All from different places, different handwriting, but all warning me to stay silent. Did you think they were from inside the church? The host asked. At first, yes, Keanu replied. But over time I saw connections. He set the letter down. The deaths of reformist priests, journalists vanishing while investigating Vatican finances, marginal notes in old Bibles hidden in locked archives, patterns, warnings. The host opened his mouth, then closed it. Keanu continued. I came across a phrase written in Latin, repeated across documents. He looked into the camera. Sine nomine. The word sent a shiver through the audience. It means without name, he explained. Not an organization, not a group, just a belief. A hidden network of those who no longer trust the church but still believe in God, the host whispered. And you think the Pope trusted them? Keanu shook his head. No, he feared them. But he knew they might be necessary because the church, as it was, might not survive what was coming. Another silence, heavier still. Then Keanu said something that shifted the air. And that's when I realized the Pope didn't choose me by chance. The host stared. What do you mean? Keanu's eyes darkened, not with fear, but with memory. He saw something in me, something I didn't see. Not until the dream. He picked up another sheet from the folder, this one worn but newer. The host stayed silent, sensing the room had crossed into uncharted territory. This arrived weeks before the Pope died, Keanu said. No sender, just a note slipped under my hotel room door. He held it up. No seal, no signature, just typewritten words on yellowed paper. He read, he is surrounded. If you open the envelope, there will be consequences. Silence protects more than you know. The audience stirred. The host blinked, shaken. I didn't know what to make of it, Keanu said. But the letters kept coming. All different, all urgent, all saying the same thing, stay quiet. Did you try to find out who sent them? The host asked. Keanu nodded. I tried. Private investigators, contacts in Europe, nothing. No fingerprints, no CCTV. Whoever sent these knew what they were doing. He opened a thin folder revealing newspaper clippings, scribbled notes, photographs. He laid a few on the table. At first I thought I was imagining connections. Paranoia makes you see patterns where there are none. But then, he picked up a photo of a smiling young priest, vibrant and alive. This was Father Matteo. He led youth programs in Palermo, spoke out about corruption in church finances. He disappeared on his way to Rome. Another clipping, a headline in Italian. A journalist found dead in the Tiber River. She was investigating. Vatican real estate ties to shadow companies in South America. They called it suicide, but she'd published an expose 2 days earlier. The host was visibly rattled. Keanu, this is a lot to process. But Keanu pressed on. Then I found notes hidden in old Bibles, not online, not cataloged. Handwritten, sometimes in Latin, sometimes in symbols. He slid one across the table. A crude sketch of an eye. Beneath it 3 words, sine nomine vivit. Without name lives, Keanu translated. Over and over in margins, buried in forgotten scriptures. The host reached for his water but didn't drink. The audience was utterly still. And then, Keanu said, his voice dropping, I realized something even more disturbing. The Pope didn't just see something in me. He saw someone like them. Someone who moves in silence. Someone the world doesn't expect to carry something sacred. He closed the folder and met the host's gaze. He chose me not despite my distance from the church, but because of it. The host absorbed this, then asked cautiously, But why you? Keanu leaned back, eyes clouded. Because of what came after the dream. The host's brow furrowed. The one you mentioned earlier? Keanu nodded. The night I opened the envelope, I had a dream or something more. He looked into the audience. I was in a vast, abandoned basilica. Dust covered everything, no candles, no prayers, just silence. A shiver passed through the room, and at the altar he was there. Pope Francis waiting, and he spoke. The host whispered, What did he say? Keanu closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. You thought you were only an actor, he said. But I saw the man who carries silence with dignity. The audience exhaled as one, a collective gasp of awe. I woke up shaking, sweating, Keanu said. I'd never felt anything like it. Since that night, I haven't been the same. The host stared. Do you think he knew he was going to die? Keanu didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quiet. He wasn't afraid of death. He was afraid of dying for nothing. The weight of those words pressed down on the room. Keanu reached into the folder again. And that's why tonight, Liv, I'm going to show you something never meant to be seen. The studio fell silent. The host didn't speak. The audience didn't move. Keanu was no longer just a guest. He was a conduit for something deeper. He took a breath. The dream wasn't like anything I'd experienced. It didn't feel like imagination. It felt delivered. He rested his hands on the table. I was in an enormous church, empty. The silence hummed in my chest. Dust drifted in the light. Every footstep echoed like thunder. I didn't know where I was, but it felt sacred and abandoned. He paused, voice soft but steady. At the altar, he was waiting. Pope Francis, but not like before. He wasn't frail. He was calm, almost radiant. The host leaned in, captivated. What did he say? Keanu looked out at the audience, addressing each soul. You thought you would only play a man of conviction, but you were always more. You carry silence like a mantle. You carry it with dignity. He paused. He told me the church was drowning in its own echo, that the voice of God had been buried under centuries of noise, that only someone who values silence could hear it again. The host swallowed hard. Do you believe it was really him? Keanu's voice was raw. I don't know what to believe, but it changed me. I stopped working as much. I started reading. Scripture, theology, mysticism, apocryphal texts. I've been trying to understand what he wanted me to do. He pulled a small, worn notebook from his coat. I started writing every night, thoughts, symbols, questions. Sometimes I feel like I'm not the one writing. The host, visibly shaken, asked, Keanu, are you afraid? Keanu paused. I was for a long time. But now I think the fear was just the first test. He glanced at the rosary. The Pope said something else in the dream just before it ended. The host waited. Your silence will be a door, Keanu quoted. But you must decide if you'll let others walk through it or keep it locked forever. The host looked overwhelmed. This is not what I expected when you sat down tonight. Keanu offered a tired smile. It's not what I expected when I walked into the Vatican either. The host pressed, so why now? Why tell this on live television? Keanu looked into the camera. Because truth is quieter than lies. And if I don't say this now, I might never get another chance. He leaned back. And because there's something I need to show you. The host hesitated. Is it dangerous? Maybe, Keanu said. But what scares me more is what happens if I don't. He reached into the folder one last time, pulling out a small rectangular object. His fingers trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of inevitability. The host leaned in. What is it? Keanu held it up, face down. A photograph from that night in the Vatican. A private moment someone else captured. The audience was still, every breath suspended. Me and the Pope in the garden. He flipped the photo over, but there's something else in it. The host's voice cracked. What? Keanu looked down. A figure, hooded in the background, barely visible. He placed the photo on the table, face up but angled away from the cameras. This figure appears in 3 other images I've received over the years. Always watching, always hidden. The host whispered, Who is it? Keanu's eyes lifted. I don't know. A long beat. But the Pope warned me in the dream. You'll see the shadow before you see the light. He laid out the other photos, shielding them from the cameras. The Pope's last words to me were, You will see the shadow before you see the light. The host fell silent. It's not a threat, Keanu added. It's a warning. Something's coming, and it won't be the church that faces it. It'll be us. He stood to leave, then paused at the curtain. And if you think this ends here, he turned back, eyes piercing. Wait, because what came after this was worse.